These Elac speakers, they surprised me, considering their size, but more importantly, their price. And using the Elac speakers, I can honestly say that I didn't notice too much of a difference when watching movies.
I can't clear my mind of yesterday. I really wish you hadn't pushed me aside. I was only holding on to what you gave me.
A few months ago, I purchased some bookshelf speakers from a brand that I had never listened to before on Amazon for $68 a pair. And now I'm ready to tell you what I think. This is my review of the Elac BS41-BK bookshelf speakers. Let's discuss. These Elac speakers, they surprised me, considering their size, but more importantly, their price. But before we get into the review, let's briefly run through the specs again for a refresher. The Elac BS41-BK bookshelf speakers features 80-watt peak power handling, which helps ensure rich, dynamic sound. It has a 1-inch cloth dome tweeter with one 4-inch woven aramid fiber cone woofer for clear sounding highs and lows. It houses a two-way speaker system that sounds like one source rather than several separate sources. It has binding post connectors with a secure connection. Its 48 Hz to 20 kHz frequency response offers a wide range of accurately produced sound. It has an 84.5 decibel sensitivity for powerful sound, and its 6 ohm impedance ensures efficient conduction of power through the speaker. Now, it's worth noting that these speakers are a little more harder to drive as they're 6 ohm speakers. Most speakers these days are 8 ohm, so you can typically drive an 8 ohm speaker with less wattage. So you'll want to pair these with a receiver or an amplifier that's going to give them enough power to drive the speakers. I'm using an Emotiva XPA3 Gen 2 with 200 watts a channel for my LCR. So this is more than enough power to drive these speakers. If you're going to be using these speakers in a 2-channel setup, then you'll probably be okay with the 80 watts peak power handling. But if you're going to be using them in a home theater setup where the dynamic range is always changing, with bombs and explosions in blockbuster movies like No Time to Die, Godzilla vs. Kong, Interstellar, or The Incredible Hulk, then you might want to give them a little more power. As I said, my XPA3 was feeding them 200 watts a channel, and I never had any issues. After hooking up the speakers, I reran Anthem Arc Genesis, which is an award-winning room correction software for Anthem and Paradigm products. I have 6 seats in my theater, so obviously I set 6 speaker locations when I ran the room correction. For review, I'll be using an Anthem MRX 720 receiver with my Emotiva XPA3. For movies, I'm using an NVIDIA Shield paired with a Plex server, and all files are 1-to-1 from the 4K Blu-ray. And for music, I'll be streaming music files from my Plex server to my Apple TV 4K. So let's take a look at how these speakers measured in my room. But first, let me give you my room dimensions for scale. My room measures 10 feet wide, my ceiling is 8 feet tall, and the room is about 26 feet deep at the longest. So, not an overly large room, but it's not small either. Now, one really cool feature of Anthem's room correction software is that after you complete your calibration, you can save or print a PDF document with graphs of how your speakers measure in your listening area. Here's how the Elacs measured in my theater. All right, so I have the Arc Genesis report in front of me, the PDF report that you can generate after you run Arc Genesis. Now, disclaimer, I have not viewed any of this data yet. This is the first time I'm looking at it, and I purposefully did that. So I wanted to listen to the speakers, and I wanted to listen to them before I ran Arc and after. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to see if what I'm hearing is going to correlate to what Arc is going to do, or what Arc is going to find once it does its room correction software, and then once it actually does an adds correction. So I want to let you know what I found before I ran Arc Genesis. So when I was listening to the speakers, whether it be movies or music, but primarily movies, I noticed that at lower volumes, the speakers sounded great, absolutely fine. I didn't notice much of a difference between my Polk floor standing speakers. However, it was when I started to raise the volume to higher levels is that I noticed the speakers started to lose some fidelity. They started to sound kind of flat. They started to sound kind of, small, and they just didn't sound very good. Now, I typically like to listen to movies at -18, -16 on my receiver. Just depends on the audio mix of the movie. For instance, Disney. We all know that Disney has a track record of just mediocre surround mixes, especially with object-based audio, Dolby Atmos. But I did find that when I turn the volume up, now I typically don't listen beyond -16 if the recording warrants it, if it's a really low recording and I have to bump it up. But for the review, I did increase the volume because I wanted to see how the speakers would react to higher volumes, and they didn't sound very good. And after I ran Arc, I still noticed it some, but that still could be because of the size of my room. My room is about 26 feet deep, so I don't expect those speakers to completely fill the room, with immersive sound. I don't expect them to just engulf me and sound like a floor standing speaker would be, because they only have one 4-inch woofer and they're very small bookshelf speakers. So that may differ in your size room. If you have a smaller room, then you may not have the issue that I had. But I wanted to see if what I was hearing is going to correlate with the software. So this is the first time that I'm looking at the software with you guys. I want to share it with you guys so that you can see the results, what room correction does, how important room correction is. And if you have a similar size room, obviously it's not going to sound the same, but if you have a similar size room, you can get an idea of how these might measure in your room. So let's take a look. Okay, so here I have the Arc Genesis report, and you can see it's my MRX 720 Anthem receiver, and this was done on February 23rd, 2022. So it was a while ago. But let's look at the front speakers first. The front left. So first, let me start by saying that when you look at this graph, you have 3 different lines. So the black line is going to be your target curve. That's where we want our speakers to be in that range. And then you have the red line. That's going to be what Arc measured the speaker, how it measured the speaker. And then the green line is going to be what Arc measured and then corrected the measurements if it needed to, based on what Arc found how the speaker was measuring. So if we look at the line here, it's actually pretty even. These speakers actually measured pretty good in my room. However, I was correct. There is a massive spike here. So if we look at, it looks like it's about 85 to 90 decibels at 65 to 70 hertz. There's a massive spike you can see here in this red line, because remember, the black is where we want to be at and the red line is what Arc measured. There's a massive spike there, and that's not good. That shouldn't happen. And then as we get to about looks like about 200 kilohertz, it starts to even out. So after that, it actually measured pretty good, and Arc really didn't have to do very much to it. There's still some little spikes here and there, but you probably aren't going to notice those that much as opposed to that massive one right there around, 65, 70 hertz. So look at what ARC did to the measurement. Look at how the speakers measured at that range. For whatever reason, right there in that range, it just did not measure well. And I could actually hear that. I noticed that when I was turning up the volume. So let's take a look at the right speaker. So if we scroll down, we need to go over. So front right, and same thing. So these speakers actually measured almost exactly the same. Now the front right looks like there's a little bit more spike at the top at the same range, but it looks like there's a little bit bigger spike there. So if we go back to our front left, so yeah, there's a small gap. You're not going to notice that difference when you're listening, but there was a difference. So again, around that, see 85 to 90 decibels and 60, 65, 70 hertz. For whatever reason, they just did not measure well in my room at those frequencies. And then ARC, you can see that it pretty much evened out. Same spot as the front left did, and then ARC corrected it. So it gives you an idea of how these speakers might measure in your room. Again, every room is going to be different. Your room is going to measure differently with these speakers. Someone else's room is going to measure differently with these speakers. But one thing I do like is that these speakers measured pretty much exactly the same, which means the acoustic treatment that I have in my room is doing its job. Now, just to give you an idea of where I had those placed, I have them placed in the same spot, but on the top of my floor standing speakers because I don't have any bookshelf speaker stands. So that's not ideal because when I measured them, they were above ear level, and that's not ideal. But I didn't have anywhere else to put them, but they were towed into the listening position, and as you can see, they measured pretty much exactly the same. So that's very good. And like I said, I wanted to show you guys how these speakers measured in my room. If you have an Anthem receiver or you have some other receiver where you can actually generate a report and see what these speakers are actually doing in your room, it's so helpful. And you can actually go back in to the software and make corrections if you want to. If you're not happy with what the room correction software did, you can go in and tweak it. So that's how these speakers measured in my room. So now you've seen how these speakers measured in my room, but how do they sound to me? So I have to say, I was pretty surprised with these speakers. My normal floor standing Polk speakers, they are full range, but they have served me very well over the years. And using the Elac speakers, I can honestly say that I didn't notice too much of a difference when watching movies. Now obviously you're gonna need to pair these speakers with a subwoofer, as these things produce almost no bass on their own. But with a 4-inch woofer, that's to be expected. But more on that in a bit. For review, I watched a handful of some of my favorite movies that showcase some great dynamics and superb Dolby Atmos and DTS tracks. The BS41s did a great job in reproducing fidelity and dynamics when paired with the subwoofer. Seeing as I have two smart switches connected to both of my subwoofers, I was able to turn the subwoofers off and on in real time using HomeKit on my iPad while watching and listening to movies for some A and B comparisons. Now, as I mentioned, when these speakers are paired with a subwoofer, they sound great. However, without a sub, these speakers sound more flat and tiny. But again, with the 4-inch woofer, these speakers aren't going to be pumping out any ultra low frequencies. Now, I typically like to listen to movies at around -18 or -16 on my Anthem receiver, depending on how the movie was mastered. And I noticed that when I began to raise the volume to my normal listening level or higher, the speaker started to lose some fidelity and sounded a little tiny, even with 2 subs. Turning both subs off made them sound even more flat and tiny at higher listening levels. This is more than likely due to only having a single 4-inch woofer. Increasing the woofer size to, let's say, 6 inches would more than likely improve this issue, and adding an additional mid-range woofer would definitely help increase the range and sonic fidelity. But that would require a bigger enclosure. Now, if you're primarily a 2-channel listener, then these speakers will more than likely put a smile on your face when you consider the size and the price, and the sound they are able to output bang for buck. Now, I'm not really a 2-channel person, but to have a more rounded review, I listened to some of my favorite rock tracks as well.
I really wish you hadn't pushed me aside. I was only holding on to what you gave me.
I did the same comparisons as I did with movie tracks, listening with the subs on and off. And I have to say the same issues were still there, but since most genres of music, especially rock, typically don't have a ton of bass in them, I personally feel that these speakers did a much better job in 2-channel than for movies, even with the subs off. Alright, so who would I recommend these speakers to? Well, that depends. If you're a home theater enthusiast and you want to experience the reproduction of big blockbuster movies in your local theater, and you have a fairly large room, then I have to say these speakers fall short, and I would just encourage you to look for bigger bookshelf speakers with a bigger enclosure and bigger woofer, or a bookshelf speaker with more mid-range drivers. Now, it's worth noting that my thoughts on these speakers falling short, and not by much I might add, is probably due more to room size. But I wouldn't expect these speakers to completely envelop and fill a 26-foot deep room. Not for a front stage, at least. So take that with a grain of salt. Now, if you're more of a 2-channel music lover, then I think these will suffice, and paired with a sub or 2, you'll be more than happy. However, these speakers are by no means whack or janky, and if you're on a budget, or tight on space, or you're just starting to build your home theater, and you want a starter system that you can upgrade in the future, the BS41s can't be beat, bang for buck, as long as you pair them with a sub. It all depends on your room size though. In a small or medium sized room, I think these speakers will beat out anything comparable in the same class, hands down. But for larger spaces, you're probably going to need something with more drivers. Alright, so at the time of this review, the BS41s can be had for $150 a pair on Amazon.com. Link in the description. However, when I bought my pair back in February, I paid $74 for the pair. That's $37 each. Man, talk about a steal. The rumor was that this was a pricing mistake on Amazon's part that has now been rectified. So, who knows? Maybe they'll go on sale again. But even at $150 a pair, I reiterate, these things cannot be beat. Bang for buck. But if you do find them at $74 a pair again, buy them. Don't hesitate. Stop what you're doing. Just buy them. Alright, so there you have it, folks. The first home theater under $200 speaker review is a wrap. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And I have to say, doing speaker reviews, it's not easy. It took me a few months to get here, but it was so much fun. I learned a lot, and I'm really looking forward to the future of this series. But before we conclude this video, it's time for Query of the Week. This week's query is, have you experienced the Elac BS41-BK bookshelf speakers in your home theater? If so, what are your thoughts? And are you using them for 2-channel or a multi-channel home theater setup? Let me know in the comments. Alright guys, well that's going to conclude it for the review of the BS41-BK bookshelf speakers. As I said, this is the first review in the home theater under $200 series, and I'm really excited about this series. I still have the Yamo bookshelf speakers that I need to test and review, so that'll be coming up in the next coming months. But I'm really excited about this. I really want to help you guys build your dream home theater, even if you have to start small and start frugal. You have to start somewhere. Most of us don't have the luxury of going out and spending thousands of dollars on speakers or equipment. So this series is designed to help you get started anywhere that you can. So if you like this video, why don't you go ahead and give me a like, hit the subscribe button if you're not already, and hit that bell notification so you know when I post new videos. I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm Haterade Cowboy, and this is Haterade Cowboy Cinema.